Something really big is happening right now in science, in medicine, and honestly, in our whole culture. We're talking about substances that were once completely demonized, now being talked about as maybe the next revolution in mental health treatment. We are smack in the middle of a full-blown psychedelic renaissance, and it's a huge shift, moving these compounds from the absolute fringe right to the front line of medicine. So let's dive in and figure out how we got here.
I mean, just look at this. On the one hand, you've got the government declaring a full-scale war on drugs. And on the other, you have pretty much the highest seal of medical approval you can get, the FDA calling MDMA a breakthrough therapy. These two headlines are only about 50 years apart, but they feel like they're from two completely different planets. It's wild, right? So what on earth changed? Okay, first, let's just take a second to grasp the sheer scale of this comeback. This isn't some small underground movement anymore. Oh no, this is a well-funded, scientifically serious, mainstream phenomenon. And hey, this isn't just media hype. The data right here on this slide tells the whole story. Just look at that curve. Between 2010 and 2021, the number of clinical trials for major psychedelics just skyrocketed. We're talking about a massive, serious investment in top-tier scientific research. And all that scientific interest, it's being reflected right back in the culture. The whole conversation has moved so far beyond its old counterculture stereotypes. I mean, can you imagine seeing a headline like this even 10 years ago? Thousands of moms microdosing to handle the stress of parenting? No way. It just shows you how mainstream this whole thing has become. And it's not just about managing stress. It's now being sold as a luxury wellness experience. So you've got everything from academic labs to suburban homes to these high-end five-star retreats. Psychedelics are being explored across the entire social and economic map. It's a complete rebranding. But here's the thing. This renaissance is really more of a rediscovery. To really get what's happening now, we have to rewind and look at the amazing research that was happening decades ago and find out why it all came to such a sudden, screeching halt. This timeline lays out the early days perfectly. It all starts way back in 1938 when Albert Hofmann first synthesized LSD. And then through the 50s and 60s, there was this explosion of totally legitimate scientific research into how it could be used to treat things like anxiety and addiction. And then this happened. Just look at that graph. All those research publications peaked in the late 1960s, and then they just fall off a cliff. It's not like the science failed, it was actively stopped. The culture wars kicked in, the political tides turned, and the scientists were basically kicked out of their own labs.
And this right here is the culprit, the Controlled Substances Act of 1970. It puts psychedelics like psilocybin and LSD into Schedule 1. In plain English, that means they were officially labeled as having, quote, no currently accepted medical use and a high potential for abuse. And just like that, bam, that single law slammed the door shut on almost all legitimate research for nearly half a century.
Okay, so now that the door is finally creaking back open, what are we finding out? Let's get into the incredible modern science of what these substances are actually doing inside our brains to create these potentially life-changing therapeutic effects. All right, first things first, let's get a clear definition on the table. At their very core, classic psychedelics work by interacting with our brain's serotonin system. The stuff that helps regulate our mood. This interaction is what kicks off those non-ordinary states of consciousness, which researchers now believe is the absolute key to their therapeutic power. But, and this is super important, not all these compounds work the same way. This table gives us a great side-by-side of two of the heavy hitters being studied right now, ketamine and psilocybin. And as you can see, they're really different. Ketamine is a legal anesthesia, it works on a totally different brain system, and its effects last maybe 40 minutes. Psilocybin, on the other hand, is still a Schedule 1 drug, it mimics serotonin, and the experience can last for hours. Understanding these differences is absolutely crucial. And this image right here, this is the wow moment. This really gets to the heart of the big idea, neuroplasticity. On the left, you've got a brain with its normal communication patterns. On the right, a brain on psilocybin, it's just lit up, hyperconnected. It's literally forming new pathways, breaking out of old, rigid, and maybe negative thought patterns. So the goal here isn't to just put a Band-Aid on symptoms. It's to help the brain fundamentally rewire itself.
And the results we're seeing? They are seriously promising. Just take MDMA-assisted therapy for PTSD.
Clinical trials have shown that the improvements people feel aren't just a temporary fix. They're durable. They last for at least 6 months to a year after the very last session. That suggests a treatment that might actually be getting to the root of the trauma, not just managing it. Now, while all this super rigorous clinical research is going on, there's this other massive cultural experiment happening right alongside it: microdosing. This is the whole idea of taking these tiny, subperceptual doses, not to trip, but to try and boost your mood, your creativity, or your focus. This quote from a user really captures what people are hoping for. They don't see it as a magic bullet. They see it as a catalyst, something that just amplifies all the other positive changes they're already trying to make, whether that's through therapy, exercise, or meditation. It's like a booster pack for self-improvement. So, why are people actually doing this? Well, this chart breaks it down pretty clearly. A big chunk of people are using it for self-treatment, trying to manage things like depression. Then you have another major group focused on self-optimization, enhancing their creativity or performance at work. And then there's a smaller group just doing it for pure exploration. But, and this is a really big but, it is absolutely crucial to understand this is not a risk-free thing to do. The very same research that points out the benefits also catalogs the downsides. For some people, it can unexpectedly ramp up their anxiety or even trigger panic attacks. Others just feel physically uncomfortable or restless. And yeah, for a lot of users, they just don't get the results they were hoping for at all. This is not a panacea. So all of this brings us right here, to the future. With the science, the culture, and big business all racing forward, we are suddenly facing a whole bunch of incredibly complex ethical, legal, and practical questions that we have to answer. And we have to answer them fast. And trust me, these are the big, thorny ones. I mean, how do you get informed consent for an experience that, by its very nature, could fundamentally change who you are at your core? Who gets to be a therapist or a guide? And how do we protect people when they're in such a vulnerable state? And the FDA regulates drugs, sure, but so much of this therapy relies on the set and setting, the whole environment, which is a whole other regulatory minefield. In that messy conflict between federal and state law, it's not a future problem. It's happening right now. Just look at this map. It's a wild patchwork of different decriminalization and legalization efforts popping up all over the country. We literally have a situation where something might be legal in one city, but is a federal crime just down the highway. This legal chaos is just getting bigger every year. So when you boil it all down, it comes to this. The science and the culture are moving at lightning speed. They're suggesting that these substances could profoundly change our minds and our entire approach to mental health. The real question is, are institutions, our laws, and our society ready to change the rules to keep up?